much, Mr. Speaker. Again, I have to apologize for my hoarse voice, which I hope sounds more sultry to you than it sounds to me. There's an expression, and I've certainly heard it in Thornhill. Maybe it's just a Thornhill sort of thing, but that the reason that we have kids is so that we can have grandchildren. Because I think that being a grandparent, apparently, I'm not there yet, apparently being a grandparent is a heck of a lot more fun than being a parent, and you can certainly see why, because when you're a grandparent, you're there for all the good times, and you can say bye-bye when it's not so great. Well, I grew up with my grandparents living across the street from me, and the neighbors used to laugh, but there'd be containers of food coming in one direction full and going back in the other direction empty. And we could always sneak over to the grandparents' house when our parents weren't letting us watch TV or do other things. Well, my grandparents really were parents, and if my parents would have split up, as some of my friends' parents had, it's very possible that they could have made a court date and gotten divorced without the grandparents' knowledge. How would the grandparents know unless they're being told? People can sneak off, get divorced, and the grandparents wouldn't have any input. And I think that this bill isn't insisting that grandparents remain in their grandchildren's lives. What this bill is saying is they must be aware. That's how I'm taking it. That the grandparents must be told there is a divorce going on. The kid has to be, maybe if they're old enough, discussed to assess what the emotional ties are with the grandparents, and to see if the court wants to mandate that the grandparents should have access, obviously if they want to have access, that they're able to somehow communicate that to the court system, to the judge. And we see too often in custody disputes that there's a lot of sour grapes and chips on people's shoulder, and they'll do anything to punish the opposite party, even so much as hurt their own child by denying their child access to their in-laws, or maybe even their own parents who maybe they feel slighted them. Okay? So I think that the member from Algoma Manitoulin is addressing something that does affect a lot of people. I don't think that this is a small number of grandparents. Certainly there's the vocal grandparents. We've heard of them in the newspapers who've protested not having access to the grandchildren. But I think that there are probably tens of thousands of grandparents who are denied access to their grandchildren. Perhaps the grandchildren moved away and they're not even able to, if they offer to have the grandchildren fly to visit them, they're not even able to communicate that because they might not even know where their grandchildren are if the court doesn't mandate that they are allowed to have some kind of access. So I'm reminded by, he's not here today, but the member from Etobicoke Centre told a beautiful story about how his grandfather insisted he learn Ukrainian and learn about the Ukrainian culture, and that it was one of the closest relationships in his life, and that he really credits his grandfather for a lot of his success. And I bet that if we speak to a lot of people in here and we talk about our families and who were influential in our lives, I think that a lot of us here had a support system that went beyond just our parents and our siblings. It went to aunts and uncles and grandparents, and it definitely does take a village to raise a child. And I would hate to, for the child's sake, to see that they're denied a relationship with their grandparents if they want to have that relationship and if the grandparents want to have that relationship. So I am also looking forward to hearing from members of the community. I think that it's going to be interesting in committee to see what community groups come to speak on this and what they have to say. And I think that the fact that we're living in a multicultural country really says a lot about the different cultures and the different attitudes to raising children. And I think that a lot of the new Canadians, we certainly see it when we go knocking on doors, Mr. Speaker, that the doors opened and you start talking to somebody and it turns out they're the grandparent, they're not the parent, and the grandparents are there. They're sometimes living with 2 or 3 generations, sometimes 4 generations in one house, and it's a very vibrant, lively household, and those children are extremely, extremely lucky, Mr. Speaker, to be able to have that type of atmosphere and that type of upbringing. And I think that the main thing that we all have to remember is that the child should come first. And if a child is only a toddler and the parents get divorced, that child might have different needs as a toddler than they have growing up and being older, perhaps in their teens. And I think that it would be very sad if we couldn't ensure that grandparents could somehow have a connection to their grandchildren if the grandchildren want that connection and the grandparents want that connection. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much.